Welcome to the CyberGov Podcast, where you'll learn how to build a cybersecurity strategy that will help you earn more revenue across your government contracting business. Welcome back to the CyberGov Podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Tim O'Hara, the Cyber Drummer. Now, just the name alone, the Cyber Drummer. I have an affection for music, so this is right up my alley. I cannot wait for this conversation here. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself, your role, and how long you've been in this position.
Sure. Well, I'm in the suburbs of Chicago. That was the first thing. And I am the head of data risk management at the Hack Ninja. So what we say is if we hack you, or if you hire us and we don't hack you, we save you money. If we do hack you, we save you a whole lot more.
Like that. I like that.
My background is I'm an inactive CPA. So I understand how data and cyber are very interrelated. And I just have a risk-oriented mindset, which stems from early on in my career when I had a full head of hair. As you see where I ended up, not quite the same. Right. Well, grass doesn't grow on busy streets, right? Early on in my career, I was running disbursements at an insurance company, and we sent out about $10 million a week. And I was there about 3 weeks, and I was still figuring the operation out. But one of my staff said, "Tim, how come we're sending so many refunds today?" And I'm like, "How many do we normally send?" She's like, 12. And so I said, "Well, how many are we sending?" And she goes, 8,000.
Wow.
And they're $20,000 a piece.
Wow.
Right. So, and I said, "Did you mail them?" She's like, "No, I saw they were printing and I saw the reason code and it looked like an awful lot of them." I said, good catch. And so when we looked into it, what happened is our bank sent us a lockbox file every day, a deposit file.
Mm-hmm.
So January 12th, they sent us the January 12th file, as they should. On February 12th, they send the January file again instead of sending us the current day. We didn't have a process in place to detect that, and boom, we applied the same file again. Those clients ended up with credit balances, and our system said, "Oh, once a client has a credit balance for over 60 days, send them a check." So there was a whole lot of those were invalid refunds. And so when we really asked our bank, how did this happen? We understand what, but how? They're using that from their test library, and they send it to production by mistake. And ergo, we had our... So, and this is the foundation of my career. This is how it ties into cyber. I developed, I call a zero trust data framework. So everyone's talking about zero trust from a cyber standpoint, but it's zero trust on cyber, but also on data.
Yes.
Because what are you going to get out?
Garbage in, garbage out.
And so the same mindset you can apply to both, because you not only want to make sure that the roads are open and the bridges are connected in your tech stack, but you don't have a car going the wrong way down a one-way street.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned CPA, and with this specific instance, is that how you transitioned into cyber, or how did you move from?
That's actually, yes. What happened is I realized I liked to do the risk management stuff a whole lot more than I like to reconciling payments. And so I started to work with, multinational companies and risk-oriented projects. I started in the data layer, and then cyber is just a set of permissions that relate to transactions and things that are going on. That's become a natural progression in my career. I was actually the tech for the American Institute of CPAs. They issued a framework for risk management a few years ago. I was the technical advisor on that program.
Awesome. So you kind of were able to skill that you had from being a CPA, morph that into risk management, or not even really morph it into it, because there's still some risk management with being a CPA, and then become an advisor in that space, which is unique. I have not heard anybody doing that before, but unique, very unique there. I like that portion.
It's always those blind spots that are gonna, bite you in the rear end. My first one was when I was about 25, when the example I gave, and it just changed my whole mindset. And now I think, how can I help others avoid those pitfalls?
I like that. And it does take something to happen for us to look at it and say, you know what? I've seen this. And if I'm seeing this, I know I'm not the only person that is experiencing this. How can I help others? It's exactly kind of how we got into this business as it relates to cybersecurity. So I wanted to help individuals. I wanted to help small businesses, things like that, to protect themselves. And speaking about risk management, I see it from a lot of different places when I talk with different businesses, different practitioners, and we talk about risk management. Some folks have an approach of seeing it in a typical siloed type of approach, which, it's okay. I also see some individuals that take it from a horizontal approach. And I know that from your perspective, you like to look at that and it should be horizontal versus the typical siloed approach. Would you care to go into that and how you approach that specific risk management
Sure.
type of perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is companies typically think about risk a couple ways. One, they're basically focusing their time on things that have gone wrong in the past. That's one thing. So those are called known risks. And so if it's not known, it's then unknown, right? The opposite. So, but the way companies manage risk is they're looking at credit risk and looking at, that's customers leaving, or, looking in buckets. But as transactions happen, there's an origination of something, a purchase order, a paycheck, a sale, right? Yep. There's an origination process, and then there's an approval. Steps happen, boom, boom, boom. All these risks are happening simultaneously. The transaction is traversing, through the system. Because of that, you have to think not only at a time, what could go wrong here. So you basically have to walk through the life cycle of your high risk transactions in particular, and think about, so that you can identify gaps that you don't see today.
Awesome. And that's just identifying the gaps that you don't see today, blind spots and things like that. And that is something that I really would like to kind of dive into from a risk management perspective. So we have third parties, specifically for government contractors. And I know this has been talked about so many times, this whole CMMC piece. And when I think about CMMC or just assessments in general, it is so you can have that gap analysis or that gap assessment to find those blind spots. Because if you're a CEO, you're typically focused on running the business, right?
That's right.
Your goal is to run the business and generate income, help your customers. You may not be looking at those blind spots. So how can those assessments help you to find those blind spots?
Sure. The first thing is you're identifying the drivers of those risks, which are change, complexity, communication between parties across internally or externally, right? And then conversion, right? We're taking something, a raw material, and we're creating it into something else, right? Well, that also happens with data. You're taking in data and it becomes a transaction, right? So it's changing its form. When things go wrong, that can end up corrupting your data, corrupting your system. And so what you do is you look at those risks. And what we do, one of the things that we do at the Hack Ninja is when we're walking through those things and we identify risks, we'll actually exploit those risks to see
wait a minute. So when you say exploit those risks, do you mean like you're going to do something against that data?
Yes.
Oh.
And the reason now we get the permission.
Absolutely.
Before we do that, I don't look good in orange jumpsuits. But what we've found in doing that is when clients really see their data, they get it. When a manufacturing company that was a subcontractor on a DoD contract, when we went through, we found a number of vulnerabilities, a bunch of ports that were open. We went in one of the ports, we found all their bank accounts, their W-2s,
Ouch.
and their camera footage.
Ouch.
Yeah. And by showing them, hey, this port was open and here's what we found, they immediately
Mhm.
saw the value in closing that port.
I love that. I absolutely love that, Tim. When I say I love that, the reason I'm saying that, and I'm just kind of diving into that, is because a lot of times in our industry, when we work with different companies and we talk about the risks or the vulnerabilities that are out there to a company, it is more abstract. It's in conversation. But what you just talked about, bringing that value and showing them specifically, hey, this is what I found immediately. I can show you what I found. I have taken the steps to gather that information and bring it to you. It makes it much more tangible. Like the company can see, okay, if you found it, I'm glad you did versus somebody else finding it. And I don't know that for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So that's why I really love bringing that value of showing government contractors the vulnerabilities and providing them that information so they can correct it. Otherwise, it is just abstract talk. Yes, there are vulnerabilities out there. Completely. Yes, there are risks out there. Completely. But bringing that value and showing them is much more powerful.
Right. Yeah. The implications of doing nothing,
Mm-hmm.
And several occasions, like, they had prior company do an exam, and we typically find prior period issues that others miss. And it's just because we take the little more time to do a little more digging. And, that's really important, not only in just operational risk, but, mergers or acquisitions, when a significant amount of the deals that go badly because of unmitigated cyber and data risks. So think about it. Everyone's looking at, the asset side and the balance sheet, but the tech side typically gets overlooked in mergers and acquisitions. I mean, what you're really buying is data. And
100%.
So what we're really trying to say is you need to make that part of the assessment. And we have a really unique way to do that efficiently and effectively where, we do the magic. I guess that's the way I'll say it.
Yeah, 100%. I really like you highlighting that about mergers and acquisitions too. You are buying the data. That's what you're essentially doing. And it made me think about Marriott and Starwood hotels. So when they kind of merged between those two, and there was already some vulnerabilities and some weaknesses there, and they merged anyway. And we kind of, if you're not familiar with this whole story, I would suggest you take a look. And for our audience, take a look, maybe Google Marriott and Starwood collaboration or breach or something like that, so you can see and read what could happen around a merger and acquisition. And Tim is absolutely right. You are buying the data. And unfortunately, I do see this a lot, that the step of validating how another organization runs their IT or their practice or their risk management, it kind of gets overlooked. It is about how much money we can make together and things like that. So that part really did get overlooked. Why do you think that is, Tim?
I think because cyber, it's hard to estimate it because there's so many unknowns because of all those variables I was talking about. But with our engagements we do, we can give, as long as the transaction is being executed within a reasonable time, you can be fairly certain that there isn't any unidentified, through, an end-to-end vulnerability assessment, right? And then follow up with a test. We can determine, once the vulnerabilities were cleared up, is there anything that's still, did we close those vulnerabilities? And then recommend is like a quarterly follow-up process. And what we found after working with them for 15 months, their insurance carrier lowered their cyber insurance rates 50%.
Love it. That is Paramount. That's another portion that I think the work that we do in terms of cybersecurity, identifying risk, and either mitigating or fixing those risks, it can lower the premium. You got cyber insurance, it can lower the premium by you showing that proof to them. Hey, look at our cybersecurity posture and look what we do in terms of policies and procedures now. It can definitely lower that. I'm thinking about mergers and acquisitions. And it got me to thinking about, as government contractors work with other government contractors, even if it's not a merger or an acquisition, lots of times we see teaming agreements and working with another company. And I'm curious from your perspective, Tim, do you think there's some value of when you team with another company to talk to them about their cybersecurity posture, or possibly perhaps ask when's the last time they had a third-party audit or risk assessment or something like that? And the reason I'm asking you is because even as I team with other individuals, I do not do that right now. Just putting that out there.
Right.
I don't do that right now, but I think that's something that every government contractor, if you're going to team up with somebody, maybe that's a good idea. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is. So I always say every company has blind spots, and then they have contractors, and their contractors have blind spots. Together, those blind spots multiply.
Oh,
okay.
absolutely. Yep.
And with the amount of SaaS technology that's going on in place, right? Nobody really knows where things start and end.
Yes.
So I call it, this is my own kind of term, but it's technological counterparty risk. So if we remember 2008, the cause of the financial meltdown was counterparty risk.
Yes.
Right? Nobody knows. You saw I had $50 in my bank account on the Super Bowl. So you thought I was good for it, but you didn't know I laid 3 other bets. And also $50, and I only had $55 in my account, and I bet on the Chiefs, and you went to collect, right? And you're like, hey, Tim, where's my money? I'm sorry. Well, so think about that. That is absolutely what I tell managed service providers when they take on a new client. The first thing we recommend is the first step is we'll do it for them, because it clearly documents the delineation of, we took this over here and this was the status, and now we have a roadmap with fact-based priorities about what we're doing. And then we take another snapshot, a significant transaction, and you're opening up your series of activities. It's just like when you're getting married, right? You get a blood test, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is like the business version of the blood test. I've actually, I have a white paper that I can share about technology acquisition, and it's actually a parallel to this process, because when companies look at acquiring new technology, or acquiring new vendors, bringing on partners, they look at the dollar side and they look at the functional view, but they don't always look at the operational side as thoroughly sometimes as they should. That's where we find a lot of weakness. It's an oldie but a goodie, but they right through the HVAC vendor.
Absolutely.
It happens all the time.
And that's what we're seeing out here. Yep. That's exactly what we're seeing. Those breaches via third party. And I like the analogy that you had when you mentioned, hey, you may have contractors and they have blind spots. And then other contractors have blind spots. So those total up. And then you have that amount of risk goes along with the company, that goes along with the contractors. So not only are you at risk, your contractors could be at risk, which can put the folks that you work with at risk. So laying that out, I love the way you laid that out. I'm probably going to use that.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. Yeah. The way I say it is, when companies focus on known risks, they're basically looking at best, a third of their total risk. It's usually 20 to 30%. So the opposite of that is you're ignoring 70 to 80% of your risk,
Yes,
of your technology.
absolutely.
Now, that sounds like, wow, that's a gap. How do I fill it? Well, one way is to intensively test what's happening. And this is not with emerging technologies as well as, tried and true legacy stuff that we've been using. Because you have to make sure that when we made the changes we made have the intended outcome, and
That's a good point.
and then B, that those changes didn't create any unintended bad outcomes.
Yep, that's a good point. Definitely a good point. Now, you mentioned the work that you're doing and these types of things, especially around risk with the Hack Ninja. I'm curious, how did you get that name?
Companies, especially small and medium businesses, because tech is changing so much. I say it's changing like dog years. 7 tech years in a year, right? So,
absolutely.
And cyber is a little bit complex, and so it's hard for them to keep up with it, know what they need to know, whatever. So they basically need a highly skilled warrior, and ninjas just seem to work. And we're describing that, our unique ways of dealing with that is we do some of exploiting, and so that's a little bit about how it came about. Yeah, thank you.
Love it. Catchy name there. There is one question that I typically ask everybody on this podcast, and I'm an advocate for wellness, burnout. Been there where I felt like it was like paralysis to get things done. So I'm curious, Tim, what do you do in your spare time to prevent burnout?
Oh, sure. I get away from my computer. I play the drums.
Play the drums.
And that's where the cyber drummer comes from, because the same skills are actually 100% applicable to both. On the stage, the drummer is kind of like the cyber manager, like what's going on? How do we keep everybody in line? It's skill set. But for me, music is my happy place. I perform about 80 shows a year.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And
80 shows a year. You travel?
I do. I've continents at different times in my life, and with I would say right now about 85% of my shows are within a 3-hour drive of Chicago, but I've done stuff in New Orleans, done stuff in Florida. Farthest away I performed was London.
Oh, awesome. Great place.
And I did stuff on cruise ships and stuff too. So yeah, that's I always say, a groove a day keeps the blues away, So that's and it's good because you can, get some aggression out if you're feeling frustrated, or if you're feeling, it's good.
The cyber drummer. And what Tim is referring to. So I think my listeners may know I'm a music education major, so I'm all about things music. So this is like, not to sound cliche, but music to my ears for real. But what Tim was referring to, the drummer on stage being like the risk manager. If you've ever thought about it, listening to a song, take the drums out. If you take the drums out, percussion, all of that stuff, yeah, you got some acapella and strings or chords and things like that, but you're kind of missing that. You're missing something. You're waiting for it to come in. You're waiting for the comeback in. You're waiting for the percussion or the drums to actually come back in, and that's when it gets going. It's kind of like that in cyber and risk management too. You're waiting for that. There needs to be someone or something that's going to take hold of that and then kind of guide it to its destination. So I'm all that just brings me joy to hear you say you play.
And I've actually kind of the song 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon, right? It's got that right? So I've actually, just for my own edification, we're not going to go through it all, but I actually wrote words out to that song.
Oh, really?
Translating it into cybersecurity, called 50 Ways to Steal Your Data.
I like it.
And
Creative.
it's something like, the problem is all inside our network, said Administrator Steve. The answer is easy. If you don't think logically, just close your eyes and hit any computer key. There must be 50 ways to steal your data. Kind of like it. So I had a little fun with it.
Creative. And I was another guest, Angela, when we have been mentioning, you know what? There is a pretty good amount of cybersecurity professionals who are artists or play musician or play musical instruments. And I'm starting to see a trend here, but I just love that there's so many individuals who play instruments and have had almost prior lives. Like you said, you were a CPA. I really thought I was going to be a producer. So it's always good to have these types of conversations. I mean, we always end up at cyber. We all ended up here.
Right. Well, yeah, we should do a band sometime, like a performance of folks who've been guests. We could do even we could do it virtually, or who
That
knows?
would be awesome.
I could hop to DC.
That would be awesome.
Hour flight. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We definitely got to think about that. Take a look at that. And Tim, I just want to say thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate you educating our audience on, one thing that really stuck out to me, how fast cyber moves, risk management, and third-party assessments to kind of capture those blind spots. When you talked about mergers and acquisitions and government contractors working with other government contractors, that, hey, if you're going to be involved with somebody else that in that space, you may want to talk to them about their cybersecurity posture as well. So I truly appreciate that. Now, what's the best way that our audience could reach you, Tim?
Sure. The best way is through my LinkedIn page. If you just search Tim O'Hara, the Cyber Drummer, or the Hack Ninja, you'll find me. I really look like this, and it's just me with tie on suit. But connect with me there, and I'll be happy to make available any of my white paper content or anything that would help people. One last thing, we're launching an education program for companies. So now that once you find your vulnerabilities, now you got to find out how to fix them the right way. We don't do implementations, but there's some stuff on thehackninja.com about our cyber education program. It's like a level program for business. It's something else I would check out for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. So we can find you on LinkedIn, Tim O'Hara, the Cyber Drummer, or at thehackninja.com. Definitely appreciate your time today. And we will definitely be talking again because, look, we got to get this band together. I've talked to too many people, so we got to work out something so we can get this band going. And thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Romeo Gardner at the CyberGov Podcast, powered by Nilos. We'll catch you at the next episode. Come listen to us on YouTube, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcasting app.